Hi team, today we're going to work on linear applications. This is a really cool day because you're actually going to put all the pieces together, and hopefully at the end of today's lesson you can really start thinking about where you might see these in your everyday life. It would definitely be better if we were in the class together doing this, but we will figure this out and yeah, we'll make it work. So what I want you to start out with is go ahead and download the day's lesson and print out the PDF. It should be 4 total pages. And I want you to go ahead and work through the warm-up problem that talks about the storage units. There's 2 different storage unit situations. So take some time. It's probably going to take a little bit of kind of work and effort in figuring things out on these examples. But go ahead and give it a shot. You'll definitely want a calculator for these just to help you crunch some of the numbers. All right, hopefully you had a chance to go through and work them. So here's the first couple. For part A, what is the cost for 2 months of storage? What I want you to be thinking about here is you're paying 2 months at $90 a month. So you're going to have 2 times 90, and you have a non-refundable deposit of $105. So that means you're going to add $105 to that 2 times 90 value, and that should yield $285. For part B, how much would 3 months of storage cost? Well, instead of paying 2 months at $90, you're paying 3 months at $90. And you're still going to have that initial one-time fee of $105. For part C, sometimes people are tempted just to double part A because 4 months is twice as long as 2 months. But keep in mind, you're only paying one extra charge of $90, and you're only paying that $105 cost once. If you were to double your value in part A, that would mean that you're paying that $105 non-refundable one-time deposit 2 times, and that's just not the case. So we get $465. If we do it for 6 months of storage, same idea. We're going to do 6 times 90 plus $105. And 12 months of storage is a lot of storage, but you'll be doing 12 times 90. Excuse me, plus $105. So you'd be paying $1,185. Now for part F, how would you figure out how much or how many months you're using the storage unit for if you spent $3,345? Well, this one's a little bit of guess and check. It's definitely going to be more than 12 months. So if you want, you can start plugging in different values for X. So you could try plugging in, maybe it's 25 months. I'm just making up a number. And is 25 times 90 plus 105? If we're just kind of following our pattern here, if you notice every single time, this is the number that's changing. And the 90 and the 105 haven't changed. So if I plug in 25 right here, that would mean this would be 25 months of storage. And you can go ahead and figure out what that is, but it's not going to be 3,345. So you can keep playing around. It's going to be too low. So that means you need to make this number bigger. And it ends up being 36 months would cost you $3,345. For part G, the slope of the equation, now sometimes we don't think about these situations in terms of a linear equation, but if you have a consistent one-time cost, or monthly cost, that's a slope of a line. So if you're paying $90 for each month, that means your slope is going to be $90. That's your rate of change. That's what changes. As the months increase, you're paying another $90 per month to use that storage space. And the y-intercept is the one-time cost. So in this case, this would be that non-refundable deposit. And it was $105, so your y-intercept would be $105. And then to actually write the linear equation to model this situation, you can plug in the slope and you can plug in the y-intercept, so we would get y equals 90x plus 105. If you had a hard time solving part F and you don't like the guess and check method, because I most definitely don't, the 3,345 is actually your y value. So you can come back over here and plug that in for y, since that's your cost. And then you have a nice pretty linear equation to solve. So I would start by subtracting $105 from both sides, and then I would divide both sides by 90. I don't have my calculator handy, but let's see what happens here if I can do some mental math. And then we could divide both sides by 90. And hopefully 3,240 divided by 90 should give us the 36 months. And it does. And then you just put that back into context. Since X is talking about the number of months, this would be 36 months to yield that cost. And if you want, just maybe a quick little sketch off to the side to really think about what this situation looks like. I'm going to draw just a first quadrant graph, and my x-axis would be the number of months, and my y-axis would be my cost. And if this one starts at $105, that's where my first point is going to be. So I can have my number of months right here. So I'd have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 months, say, for example. And then this is going to be a positive slope. It's going to be going up 90 and over 1 for each one of those tick marks. And this line would just keep going on indefinitely until I'm done with the storage unit and I don't need it anymore. On the back side, we have a different scenario with a different storage unit company. So this company only charges $110 a month with no required initial deposit. So 2 months of storage would just be the 2 times the $110, because that's it. That's all I have to pay. I don't have to come up with that $105 in the beginning like I did for the last scenario. So for this one, this would be 3 times 110, so it'd be 330. 4 months would be 4 times 110. 6 months would be 6 times 110. So those ones are all pretty nice. 12 months, same idea. This would be 12 times 110. And then for part F, again, this is kind of a guess and check method where you can plug in different amounts of time to see what would yield $6,710 for your total cost. It ends up being 61 months, so you're there for quite a while. Part G now, when you look at the slope of this equation, since your rate of change is $110 per month, that means your slope is $110. Each month increase that you're using this storage unit, you pay $110. For part H, the y-intercept is 0. If there's no initial fee or deposit or charge, that means it's no money, so you're going to be starting at the origin. So to write the linear equation to model the situation, you would end up with y equals 110x plus 0, if you want to have that visualization of the 0 there, or you can just write it as y equals 110x. If I do a quick sketch of this graph just to see what it would look like, again, I would just draw a first quadrant graph because I can't have a negative number of months or I can't have a negative charge for this. My axes would still be set up the same, where x is representing the number of months and y is representing the cost. Now this one is going to start right smack dab at the origin because again, my y-intercept is 0. And then this line is going to be steeper. I'm not actually following any tick marks or anything. This is just a general line. But since the charge per month is more, that means you're going to have a steeper slope. Now, a problem like this, and this is what I'm kind of missing about not having a class discussion about this right now, is I'd want you to compare which storage unit would you actually want to use. And there's no good answer for this because it really depends on the amount of time that you need storage. So for example, if I were to do a short amount of time, if I only needed it for maybe a month or two, I'd probably go with that second option, okay? Because 2 months or 3 months was 220 versus, or 330 versus with the first one, 285 and 375. So if it's short term, I'd want to go with the second option. If this was long-term storage, well, then I'd actually want to go with the first one because you can see like comparing the 12-month values of the first one. Right here, $1,185. That's definitely cheaper than the 12-month option for the second storage unit. So just things to keep in mind. And other things to keep in mind is, you know, even if you need this for long term, maybe you don't have that extra $105 in the beginning to be able to put down. But if you can, you know, find a way to come up with that money, then you would, in the long run, be saving yourself a lot of money. So just some things to think about when you're looking at these situations. I see these a lot with used to be with cell phone plans, but cell phone plans now are usually kind of just one plan option. But like gym membership, say, for example, and we'll talk about Disney Plus here at the very end. All right, so for our lesson today, I want you to go through and I want you to work out this 11.6 applications of linear equations tying it all together worksheet. It's two sides. One side is talking about tigers, the other side is talking about hybrid vehicles. And ignore my answers for right now, but just go ahead and take a moment and try to work through those two sides and see if you can really spend some time and interpret what's going on. This may be a great time to start a group text or a group chat with some teammates so you can really get some good discussion going on. When you're done, you can go ahead and take a look. I'm going to have my answer key up here, and I'll post my answer key online as well, so you can be checking it there. All right, here's my answer key. Big things that I want to talk about would be like, for example, F, saying what does it mean when the tiger population is decreasing linearly? Well, that means that you have a negative slope, and that line is going down. As time increases, the population of the tigers is decreasing. For part G, the y-intercept, notice they don't have the y-intercept explicitly labeled on the graph, but they do have the y-intercept labeled in the equation. That's that 42,000. That's your plus b on the end. The slope, notice, is also given explicitly with the equation. So that's that end value. So that's the negative 350. So what does the slope mean? Well, the slope means that every year increase that we have, the tiger population is decreasing by 350 tigers. So definitely not a good thing. And what does the y-intercept mean in the context? Well, it means that was the number of tigers that started in the year 1900. Going through, hopefully everything else was kind of okay. Looking through, so just kind of looking at like I and J, for example, using the graph to estimate the number of tigers. The graph is always a great place just to kind of get a ballpark figure. When I was looking at it, I thought it was about 21,000 tigers, as long as you were close there, because we don't know for sure just based on the graph. So I just approximated there. And then I actually used my equation for part J to help me determine the number of tigers. So if I'm looking for the year 1960, that tells me my x value is going to be equal to 60. So I'm going to plug 60 into the equation, and that's going to spit out the y value. In this case, the y value would represent the number of tigers, so there would be 21,000 tigers in the year 1960. Okay. Part K, this isn't something we typically do, but just to kind of get the idea going, if this trend had continued, so the year 1850 would mean that your x value would be a negative 50, because you're going 50 years back from that 1900 mark. So plugging negative 50 into the equation would tell us we have 59,500. The x-intercept would represent, well, the year when the tigers would become extinct, because that means the tiger population would be 0. If you actually find the x-intercept, that puts us in the year 2020. Now, just so you know, there are some efforts in place that it's not actually following this trend, but it was at the time of the publication of this textbook. So how many tigers would you expect in the year 2025? Well, plug in 125, because the year 2025 is 125 years past the year 1900, and that gives you a strange answer. It'd end up with negative 1,750. Since we can't have a negative number of tigers, this answer is not making sense within this context. All right, for the hybrid vehicle sales, things I want to touch on here is looking at that line of best fit. So if we're looking at F and G for this one, notice that the line doesn't perfectly hit all of the data points. And that's just because this is working with real data, and so many times real data doesn't follow a perfect, pretty pattern. So the line of best fit is the line that best fits all of the data points. Now, you can kind of see that that trend is increasing, so that's why you have a positive slope here, and it doesn't hit every point, and that's okay. But that's the line that best models this situation. So your y-intercept here would be the number of cars sold in the month of January. The slope, so notice we don't actually get the slope in this equation. We did have to calculate it. So use the 2 points that you're given and find the slope, either using the formula or using a table of values to find the change in y over the change in x. And we end up with 1,800. So once you know the slope and the y-intercept, you can go ahead and plug into the equation. And so my equation is going to be y equals, let me get it highlighted here, y equals 1,800x plus 1,000, or 14,400. So for K, you can use that equation to figure out how many hybrids were sold in April. Just keep in mind April, it's so tempting to make it X equals 4 because April is the 4th month. But remember our graph said that January was month 0. So that puts us behind 1 month. Okay, for part L, how does this value compare to the data point for X equals 3? I don't know the exact number. I can guess from the graph, but I can definitely see that it's lower than that actual data point. These kinds of questions are just getting you to kind of look at the graphs and be able to, see if you can reason your way through an answer and really look at it and understand what's happening with it. What is the x-intercept for this? So plug in y equals 0 and solve the equation. I got x equals -8. So this would mean that 8 months prior to January, there were no hybrid vehicles that were sold. I don't know if this is true or not because my data values only start in January, but that's what it would mean in this context if there was one. And then if the trend continues, how many hybrids would you expect to sell in December for the given year? Well, remember, we're 1 month behind since January started at month 0. So that gives us x equals 11. So plug in 11, see what you get. We end up with 34,200 hybrids that would be sold in December. One thing I want to just add here. So a lot of you guys were really excited when Disney Plus came out a few months ago. So just thinking about this and putting this in, just context for your real life. Disney Plus is $6.99 per month, or you can pay $69.99 per year. So you might think about this like, hey, $7 a month, that's really cheap. And I don't have to come up with $70 right now to pay for the entire year. But think about it. If you're doing $6.99 per month for 12 months, so that means $6.99 times 12. That means the exact same package for Disney Plus would cost me $83.88 for a year compared to $69.99 per year. So I'm actually getting 2 months free. If I'm able to pay that $69.99 upfront. So just something to think about. This is the most recent one that I've seen in the news, and just, again, something to think about. All right, your homework tonight is going to be a little bit different. I want you to look at one of the two scenarios. So you can either look at the World Wildlife Federation one, so the tiger problem, or you can look at the hybrid car dealership problem. And I want you to write a memo to your boss answering the question. So if you're interested in the tiger population one, your scenario is you work for the World Wildlife Fund and you've been analyzing this graph, and you need to write a memo describing the urgency of this situation to your boss. So things you want to include in there would be like, what is that slope and what does it mean? What is the y-intercept? What does it mean? What is the x-intercept? What does it mean? And any additional data points that you'd want to include in there to help you make your case for the urgency of the tiger situation. Or if you'd rather work with the car dealership one, you're writing a memo to your boss explaining what you need to do for inventory for the rest of the fiscal year. So that would mean up through December. So think about, what does that slope mean? What does that y-intercept mean? What would additional data points represent in this problem? And I want you to come up with an inventory plan for the remainder of the year. If you have any questions, again, please let me know. I hope you guys are doing great, and stay safe.